Good evening. I'd like to call to order the October 4th Assembly meeting, and I'd like to thank those in the audience and those at home watching either on TV or via computer. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Ms. Domboski?
Present.
Mr. Croft?
Present.
Mr. Evans?
Here.
Mr. Flynn? Ms. Gray Jackson?
Honored to be here.
Mr. Trainee?
Present.
Mr. Steele?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Mr. Starr?
Here.
Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Mr. Weddleton?
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Mr. Wheeler, would you mind coming to the podium and leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. There are no minutes of previous meetings. Mr. Mayor?
Nothing to report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chair's report. What I wanted to do is just remind the Assembly members that in 2015, shortly after the Assembly passed a resolution directing the clerk to explore vote by mail, the Vote by Mail Executive Steering Committee was created to give the direction to the clerk's office on the project. The Vote by Mail Executive Steering Committee members included myself, Vice Chair Dick Trainee, and former Assembly member Ernie Hall. Ernie Hall initiated and spearheaded the Vote by Mail project as an Assembly member, and when he served as chair of the Assembly's Ethics and Elections Committee. The Executive Steering Committee has been directly involved in the details of the VBM project over the last 9 months. The Steering Committee initially discussed with the clerk's office hiring a project manager, participated in interviews of project managers, toured a proposed location for VBN, as well as received and reviewed periodic reports from the project manager. Mr. Peterson was invited to the last Executive Steering Committee because he currently serves as chair of the Assembly Ethics and Elections Committee, and I understand that Mr. Peterson, he's going to give a committee report to the Assembly about the last committee meeting, and I'll defer to Mr. Peterson when we get to that portion of the agenda. With that said, committee report, and I will start with Mr. Weddleton.
Thank you. The Community and Economic Development Committee has been very busy looking at marijuana applications. This Thursday at 9 a.m., join us for a look at defining the shortest practical pedestrian route in regards to marijuana facilities. And also, we'll take a look at the AO 2016-118 regarding tax incentives for replacing old buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Dunbar.
No committee report, Madam Chair, but I would like to note for the record, I attended the Legislative Committee, and from that meeting, we developed a resolution in favor of the Port of Anchorage being included on a statewide general obligation bond, and I'd just like to state again for the record to direct the clerk's office to file it as a resolution with the AML if we pass it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Starr?
No report, just an observation, and thank you to the mayor. I sat through the tourism and trade show today. Mayor was a keynote speaker at the introduction of all the members. There was well over 500 folks in the room. Lisa Murkowski was there. I was asked to stand up as an elected official, chose not to. But the mayor did a great job. I think the idea that the outreach is there. The troubling perspective that he put to the audience today, however, was that Anchorage spends more money marketing than the state of Alaska does. And so in terms of the spirit of the tourism market and what it impacts Anchorage, we're certainly going to need to put that view to the Alaska delegation. We're outmarketed by states like Arizona and Arkansas, Alabama. Those states provide more tourist dollars in the marketing campaigns than we do. So that's a big change, and one that concerns and should concern all of us in Anchorage from their ability, because you can bet that other communities will market, and that affects things like bed tax, hotel, motel, rental car tax. And so we've got to be careful we don't let our revenue, because we're not attracting the clients and customers to Anchorage. But anyhow, the mayor did a good job of defending us and spoke well at that. So that was the twofold message: was thank you to the mayor, as well as the message that he sent. We all need to be cognizant of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Ethics and Election Committee met on September 28th. The committee received an update on the vote by mail project from our contractor, Dennis Wheeler. He's the project manager. And if I may have a point of personal privilege, Madam Chair, I would like to invite Dennis forward to share the update with the entire body.
Certainly, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Wheeler.
Madam Chair, Assembly members, Mayor Berkowitz, thank you for the opportunity to come to you and update you on the Vote by Mail project. The project has a number of elements all working together towards one goal, which is to bring vote by mail to Anchorage so that there will be more voter participation by making it easier for people to cast ballots using a ballot they receive in their home mail, which they can then fill out at home at their leisure over a period of about 3 weeks and then return it to the municipality through the mail or through drop box locations. To update you on the status of the project, there are some elements I want to walk through very briefly. Number one, we are trying to acquire space for the municipality to use as an election center. We are currently in negotiations for space in the Ship Creek area. That space will allow us to set up the equipment and provide a space for the election officials to process envelopes as they come in and tally and upload the ballot results. We have an exchange of offer and counteroffer work going on between us and the owner of the property, and we're moving forward with that as best we can to achieve a nice space at a market-driven or below market-driven price that the city can use. Number two, we have all of the ballot drop boxes that we ordered available to us. They're here in town at the Northwood maintenance shop, ready to go. Ski Shop has placed those boxes on concrete pads that we can forklift into place. We have worked with a number of individuals and jurisdictions to place those boxes. We've worked with the school district, jail properties, UAA, et cetera, to place those. We're all set to go in placement. The only loose end is getting the Parks and Rec resolution, which is scheduled to happen on the 14th of this month. So that portion is very close to being done and ready to go. We are working on a signature solution so that all of the signatures of voters that we need to have in place to verify their ballots can be accomplished through gathering signatures off of registrations and other points that we have, including upcoming elections. We're working with Xerox on a solution for that. We anticipate providing test information from Xerox to the state's IT director for elections here shortly. That next meeting happens tomorrow, so we hopefully will be under contract with Xerox here in the next week or two so that we can move that portion forward. The AO to implement the code changes necessary for vote by mail has been written and reviewed with the municipal clerk's office. Next step is for me to make some changes requested by the clerk's office and present that to the Assembly Ethics and Election Committee for further study. We have been working on communication plans, including identifying professional media sources that can help us message vote by mail. And we are working on contingency planning related to staffing, worst case scenarios, procedures that we need, configuration of the space for the vote center, and so on. We have RFPs that we've been working to acquire the machinery and software to implement vote by mail. The outbound printing of envelopes and ballots is on hold pending two other RFPs that affect the type of envelope, the size of envelope, the kind of paper used on ballots, the size of ballots, and so on. The inbound envelope processing is in final scoring. We have asked vendors to provide some answers to some questions. Those answers were due by close of business today so that we could finish off the scoring and start negotiation. And then finally, the RFP for ballot tabulation system has entered negotiations. We are currently working with the top vendor, and when we bring those negotiations closer to the end, we'll run that through purchasing, and then we'll move on with acquiring that system. Now, the downside to the project is that all of this takes a tremendous amount of time and effort to pull together. When we started this project last spring, early in the spring, we had hoped to be able to move it aggressively and bring vote by mail to Anchorage in April of 2017. Based on the schedule we are looking at now, and given the hurdles we've had to deal with and overcome, the schedule will not make April 2017. The more realistic and safe schedule to ensure that we have something that is effective, transparent, accurate, and without glitch means that we need to look at this as an April 2018 full implementation. And that's where we're headed now.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Mr. Peterson, anything else?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is a little disappointing that we are not going to make our original goal of April 2017, but I think it's prudent that we make sure we get everything done correctly so that we can make the vote by mail, create confidence in the voters out there that the vote by mail will be working correctly and effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Evans?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if Mr. Wheeler's comments make an official statement, though. Is there anything we need to do officially? I know it's kind of like it doesn't look like it's going to happen by April 2017 to affirmatively state officially that the April 2017 election is not going to be a vote by mail, so people can plan accordingly. Some people have an interest in that particular election, may want to know what it's going to be. So I don't know if there's any official act we have to do to make it clear that that election is or is not vote by mail.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Steele is in the queue. You want to comment, Mr. Steele?
Yeah, I presume that includes a test run of some sort also, some testing of it. Maybe not a dry run on an election, but something broad enough to make sure we're going to be able to do it.
Yes, through the chair, Mr. Steele, that's absolutely correct. We would definitely be running testing, including being able to hopefully take ballots that we produce through our normal election and using those as tests. But we also produce test decks. The vendors help us arrange for testing to make sure that the systems work properly. Absolutely. Madam Chair, if I may,
Certainly,
to Mr. Evans' question, if I recall correctly, the Assembly passed an ordinance adopting vote by mail as a policy, but that included a provision that said your intention is to go vote by mail unless you use a special call, which is to put it back to your normal poll-based, if you will, precinct-based voting. So it may be that the action necessary is just to have a special call for the April 2017 election so that that becomes your official driver for the poll-based election.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Mr. Starr?
Mr. Wheeler, because I didn't pay attention that night, but how long is your contract good for?
My contract is for essentially for the life of the project. I don't believe it has an end date, if I recall. I'll have to go back and look and confirm that, though.
Yeah, that brings my point to the budgetary conversation that we should have in terms of what this year's proposed budget looks like from the Assembly perspective on running elections. Vote by mail probably had a price tag on it, and going back to a traditional election would have a different price tag perhaps, or any cost to undo some of the decisions that we made, whether it be storage fees or lease rates or something else. So who would best to make sure that current budget presented covers this decision?
If I may, Mr. Starr, we're working on that. Thank you.
We'll be able to see that before too much longer.
Yes,
Great.
thank you.
Thanks for your answers and your work, Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Thank you, Mr. Starr. Ms. Domboski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Wheeler, I appreciate you coming to us before the budget so we can actually contemplate exactly what Mr. Starr had said. I appreciate you making the comment about the ordinance we passed. I thought the ordinance we passed, do we actually have to make an affirmative action? Because I thought you put squirrely language in there to let us do whatever we wanted. And squirrely language is official speak for, I can't make lawyer jokes because Mr. Croft gets all nervous.
Through the chair, Ms. Domboski, I actually have the documents with me, and I'll look it up and bring the answer to you.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Domboski. Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. There's no one else in the queue. Mr. Steele? We're on committee reports.
Yes, thank you. Enterprise Committee, there is a meeting Thursday, the 14th. We are planning a field trip of sorts to Merrill Field. The manager at Merrill Field has a good trip planned, a good exposure to everything there, all that's been done, and I'm sure he will ask questions about what intentions on other things, but I think it's going to be a good trip. We did change the time. Initially, we were saying 10 10:30 to 12. Now we needed a little more time, so we did modify that to make it 10 to noon, and it will be from City Hall to Merrill Field. Mr. Abbott's arranging for transportation. So I extend an invitation. I think it'll be a good trip. There's a lot that has happened, a lot that's going on, and it'll be good for us to see. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Falsey, you're in the queue. You had a question?
Madam Chair, just to close the loop on the previous exchange regarding vote by mail, the Assembly in Ordinance 2016-33 did amend the code to provide that effective June 1st, 2016, all municipal elections shall be conducted by mail unless otherwise provided by the Assembly in the call of the election. So Mr. Wheeler's recollection was correct.
Thank you, Mr. Falsey. Mr. Trainor had a question.
Mr. Falsey, relating back to another discussion we had, measuring distance from marijuana to other facilities. The question's been, do we count every intersection as a walkway, or do they have to go to striped walkways? Would you take a look at how the state looks at alcohol licenses? Because we want to treat marijuana the way we treat alcohol, and that'll help us on Thursday when the issue comes to front of us. Thank you, Mr. Falsey.
Thank you, Mr. Trainor. Thank you, Mr. Falsey. Mr. Trainor?
Yes, Madam Chair. We've got a Rules Committee meeting on the 12th of October from 1 to 2:30. We're going to be bringing up the issue of Municipal Code Title 11, little ordinance that our friend Mr. Evans is bringing to us. So we'll be discussing that at the Rules Committee meeting, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Trainor. I'd like to remind the body that the Rules Committee is a committee of the whole. Anything else, Mr. Trainor?
No, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Trainor. Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Mr. Dunbar referenced, we did have our first legislative committee meeting and getting ready for our impending legislative program. There were a bunch of work items that came out of that, and one of the issues we're going to try and get our arms around is the structure of how we might finance completing the port project. So we will endeavor to have that in front of the body concurrent with consideration of the 2017 budget. We may or may not be successful in that venture, although if we do, we'll actually hit the deadline for the first time in, 8 or 9 years. So we'll do our best.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Evans?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tomorrow at 11 o'clock, there will be a joint meeting of the Public Safety and the Homelessness Committee meeting. It'll be in room 155 in the City Hall. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Croft?
No committee announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Croft. Ms. Domboski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have an announcement per se, but if I could have just a moment of personal privilege.
Certainly, Ms. Domboski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to really thank all those that came to the Chugach-Eagle River Senior Center. I know Mr. Dunbar was there for the tour, as well as Chair Gray Jackson and Vice Chair Trainey, but also all those that pulled together to make it really successful. We had so many people present, and I couldn't have done it without Nora from the mayor's office, so I want to say especially thank you to her. But Nancy Burke came out. We had APD, Lieutenant Carson was there, Parks and Rec, John Rada, as well as Chair Gray Jackson and Chair Trainey, and of course myself and Mr. Starr were all there. In addition, we had state and local legislators. We had the Commissioner of the Department of Corrections, the DA's office, numerous community partners, from community councils to community patrol, and all points in between, including the Chugach Volunteer Fire Department. And we had some private vendors there that did home and personal security. And I have to tell you, the response received from the community was overwhelming. I think most people thought it was productive. We really tried to be action-oriented, but it was important to the Eagle River delegation, myself and Mr. Starr, that we showed a united front from the Assembly and the Mayor's perspective. And having everybody at the table was really, really important to us. And we are just very grateful that everyone participated. The PowerPoint, I have been sharing it. I saved it in a PDF version, but I added everything that was verbally presented. And I've been asked by legislators to share it because they want to mimic it. So if anybody would like that, I'm more than happy to provide it. I could probably give it to the clerk's office, and they could give it out. And if you can pillage it, you can take it, change it, make it yours. I don't need any credit, but there was a lot of good information there, whether it was Mr. Flynn's suggestion next door to APD's Nixle and raids online and all kinds of things in between, from neighborhood watches to ways you can secure your home in your neighborhood. So if you haven't contemplated this or having a town hall like this, I'm sure Chair Gray Jackson and Trainee would have some comments and suggestions if you want to do this in your own districts. But I found it to be incredibly helpful, and I've already had requests from my community for members who missed it who want to do just like a brief version. So I think I'm going to have a couple coffees at local coffee shops where 10 or 20 people can come together. But it really was helpful, and I just want to say I am truly grateful for your participation, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Mbaki. I have to say it was really a great event. It really was, and I didn't mind spending 3 hours in Eagle River because it was so wonderful. And I also want to thank the administration for their participation, and I want to thank Mr. Mbaki and Mr. Starr for doing such a great job. You have some really great constituents. I had so much fun. It was just wonderful that I'm thinking about moving to Eagle River. Just
we would love to have you.
It was great, so thank you again for that. Thank you. Mr. Trainee, can I have a motion to incorporate the addendum and the laid-on-table items?
Madam Chair, move to incorporate the addendum to the agenda and laid on table item. There's only one I know of, item 9D5.
Second, please. Can we have a second? Second. Thank you. Okay. Addendum items. Item 9A3, AR 2016-268, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly supporting inclusion of the Port of Anchorage on a statewide general obligation bond in 2018. Item 9E4, Information Memorandum 132-2016, Anchorage Women's Commission Annual Report. Item 9F8, Ordinances and Resolutions for Introduction. AO 2016-124, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 11 to improve taxicab services by fostering more competition and related matters involving the supply and demand framework for transportation services. Item 9F9, AO 2016-102, an ordinance of the Municipality of Anchorage adopting and appropriating funds for the 2017 general government operating budget for the Municipality of Anchorage. Item 9F10, AO 2016-103, an ordinance of the Municipality of Anchorage adopting and appropriating funds for the 2017 municipal utilities/enterprise activities operating budgets in the 2017 municipal utilities/enterprise activities capital budgets. Item 9F11, AO 2016-104, an ordinance of the Municipality of Anchorage adopting and appropriating funds for the 2017 operating and capital budgets of Anchorage Community Development Authority. Item 9F12, AO 2016-105, an ordinance of the Municipality of Anchorage adopting the 2017 general government capital improvement budget. Item 9F13, AR 2016-235, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage adopting the 2017-2022 General Government Capital Improvement Program. Item 9F14, AR 2016-236, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage approving the 2017-2022 Municipal Utilities Enterprise Activities Capital Improvement Programs. Item 9F15, AR 2016-237, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage adopting the 2017-2022 six-year fiscal program. And laid on the table item 9D5, it's a Assembly Memorandum 670-2016, sole source contract with City of Whittier to provide professional police services to the Girdwood Valley Service area from approximately October 15, 2016 to a date not later than December 31st, 2016. Ask unanimous consent to include the addendum and laid on table items. Seeing no objection, they're included. Mr. Trainee, may I have a motion?
Move to approve, Madam Chair.
Consent agenda.
Madam Chair, move to approve all of them.
Consent agenda as amended. Thank you, Mr. Trainee. What we'll do now is go through the consent agenda before we vote on it and see if there are any items to be pulled. And I will start with you, Mr. Mbaki.
9 Alpha 3.
On the addendum. Thank you, Mr. Mbaki. Mr. Croft.
Nothing to pull.
Thank you, Mr. Croft. Mr. Evans.
9 Delta 5.
Laid on a table.
I read it, but I lost it already.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Flynn.
9 Alpha 2.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Trainee.
9E4.
On the addendum.
Addendum, informational memorandum.
Thank you, Mr.
32, 2016.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Anything else?
No, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Steele? Mr. Steele? Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. 9A1.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Starr?
9 Delta 2 for a conflict.
Delta 2? Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Dunbar?
No items tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Weddleton?
No items, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Ask unanimous consent to approve the consent agenda minus the items we pulled. Seeing no objection, the consent agenda is approved. We are now at agenda item number 9A1, AR 2016-259, recognizing October 2016 as Breast Cancer Awareness Month and encouraging education to increase public awareness about early detection. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to approve.
And we need a second. Second. Thank you, Mr. Trainee. And someone is going to read and someone's going to present.
I'll be reading.
Ask unanimous consent. Seeing no objection, that resolution is approved. Thank you, Mr. Trainee.
Presenting.
Is there someone here to receive this resolution? Welcome.
Great.
Hi.
The resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing October 2016 as Breast Cancer Awareness Month and encouraging education to increase public awareness about early detection. Whereas in 2016, an estimated 246,660 new cases of invasive breast cancer are expected to be diagnosed in women in the United States. And whereas about 1 in 8 women, or just under 12%, will develop invasive breast cancer over the course of their lifetimes. And whereas about 2,600 new cases of invasive breast cancer are expected to be diagnosed in men in 2016. A man's lifetime risk of breast cancer is approximately 1 in 1,000. And whereas although death rates from breast cancer have been declining since 1989, about 40,000 people will die from breast cancer or die each year. And whereas the death rate decrease is thought to be the result of treatment advances, early detection, and increased awareness. And whereas breast cancer affects every person within the municipality of Anchorage, whether as a victim or a survivor of breast cancer, or as a family member, significant other, neighbor, or co-worker. And whereas Alaska Run for Women started in 1993 and works to raise awareness of breast cancer and women's health as they showcase the talents of female athletes. And whereas Alaska Run for Women has raised over $4 million for organizations concerned with breast cancer research, education, outreach, prevention, and early detection. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizes October 2016 as Breast Cancer Awareness Month and encourages increased public awareness and education about early detection. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 4th day of October 2016.
Thank you. Thank you for the recognition. We appreciate it. And June 10th, 2017 is our 25th anniversary. It's going to be a great event. So we're going to continue raising funds.
Thank you for all you do on behalf of our community.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We are now at agenda item 9A2, 2016-266, recognizing and honoring Karen Murray for her 25 years of service with the municipality of Anchorage. Mr. Flynn.
Move to approve.
And a second. Second. Thank you. Ask unanimous approval, and I don't see any objection. This resolution is approved. Karen, where are you?
Whereas Karen Murray began her service with the municipality of Anchorage in 1990 as a public health nurse for the Department of Health and Human Services, and whereas for 25 years she has provided high-quality health care to the women of Anchorage, including helping women with family planning, cancer screening and prevention, and annual exams with essential counseling and education. And whereas Karen generously shared her women's health knowledge and expertise with the reproductive health clinic staff, cheerfully training and answering questions from staff, both new and experienced. And whereas Karen pitched in to provide leadership to the RAHC, serving as acting supervisor for multiple months when there was a vacancy in that role. And whereas Karen attended multiple Title X meetings to ensure the RHC was able to provide the most up-to-date, high-quality, and affordable planning care to the women of Anchorage. And whereas Karen was the acknowledged queen, impressive title, by the way, of writing medical protocols, sharing her knowledge and her inspiration with the RHC staff now and for years to come. And whereas Karen has worked with a generation of adolescents, counseling, treating, and helping them understand their changing bodies and emotions, and whereas Karen has provided this tremendous service to the community while also excelling in her roles of wife, mother, grandma, and friend. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Assembly resolves to recognize Karen Murray for her 25 years of service and dedication to the municipality of Anchorage and the citizens of our community. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 4th day of October, 2016.
You can say anything you want, Karen.
Thank you. And that I really enjoyed working with the municipality and at the health department. And I feel like we've made a big difference in the health of the clients that we've served throughout the whole health department. And look forward to seeing it continue on without me.
Thank you, Karen. Enjoy your retirement.
Thank you. Welcome.
We are now at Agenda Item 9A3, Air 2016-268, inclusion of the Port of Anchorage on a statewide general obligation bond in 2018. Ms. Domboski.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Thank you. Ms. Domboski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not a member of the Legislative Committee, so I saw this late. But I do have some concerns about making recommendations to put forward a statewide GEO bond. And the reason being is because I went to Juneau this year, and I had the opportunity to sit with actually most of the chairs of finance committees, and one of them remarked to me that the state has actually come very close, if not exhausted their bonding capacity. So that being the case, having that conversation, it would seem fruitless to me to support a resolution like this. But it's not to say that it won't go forward anyways. I just have concerns just from the conversations that I had with members of the legislature.
Thank you, Ms. Domboski. Mr. Croft?
Yeah, no, I think this is very important to recommend. If we know that the state is not going to have discretionary capital of any significance, it's not going to have a significant capital budget, and if we really don't do anything like this in 2018, we're going to starve our construction design industry. I mean, we simply have to decide whether we're going to continue to build Alaska or not, and if we are, this is one of the key vehicles to do it. I also am excited about the aspect of it that is a public vote. That is, we get to say in 2018, do you still believe in Alaska? Are you ready to invest and build, or are we going to largely shut this place down and have a dramatic impact, as I said, on these construction industries? Our bonding capacity is a function of state law. Our bonding ability and how much we pay for it is a function of whether we get our fiscal house in order. But there's no constitutional limit on how much we can bond. There's a practical and political limit. That is, we can bond at a reasonable rate and continue to build this state if we get our fiscal house in order. So I think this is key, both in what it says about whether we're going to continue this state that was built before oil and can survive this downturn. But if we don't do it here, it's not going to be in a capital budget, and that's going to be really devastating for our construction industry.
Thank you, Mr. Croft. Mr. Flynn?
Yeah, a little less grandiloquent comment than Mr. Croft's, but really, Ms. Domboski, to answer your question, this is sort of a timing issue. Well, okay, your comment. To your comment, this is sort of a timing issue. AML's annual conference is coming up, and this is the time when we can ask them to be considering questions for their consideration of forwarding to the legislature. The ultimate structure of how we fund the port rehabilitation project is, I would say, not entirely satisfied at this point, but at least getting this issue in front of AML, I think, for Mr. Evans' sake as a representative, it's useful for us to provide a little bit of direction and hope that they will see the value in a port that really serves the entire state as opposed to just our community. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I want to start by commending Rose on the clerk's staff and also the port for helping us draw this up so quickly. It was a very tight turnaround on this resolution. I think the resolution largely speaks for itself in terms of the necessity of getting this general obligation bond put forward, or perhaps some other financing mechanism to get the critical repairs needed to the port. Ms. Domboski's comments is the first time I've heard that expressed publicly, that there is no capacity to do this, or perhaps we've exhausted our capacity. I saw Steve from the port here. I was thinking about calling you up to have you comment on that, Steve, but I think I'll let you slip this time. I think that's fine. I would just urge us to pass this to allow Wendy and other people who are going to Juneau to be able to strongly make that case, and to hopefully have AML on our side as we make the point that this is not just the Port of Anchorage. This is a port where goods for almost the entire state flow through. This is the Port of Alaska at Anchorage, and we need the whole state behind us if we are to repair that port. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Steele?
Yes, I just want to chime in. This year, we bet the farm. We basically said, hey, we're not going to ask for anything else. We'd like to have some bonds for 200, I think 200 million is what we were asking for at that point. But the port's in bad shape. And I don't want to be an alarmist, but we're patching piles that have significant holes in them. And we've got new tenants. We've, with mats and lines, we've got cement operation and everything. And it is a statewide port. It is the best port, I believe, in the state. And it needs to be taken care of. If we have failures where we cannot use portions of the port, we're gonna be in trouble. And so I think we need to move forward on that and express every chance we get what the needs are. So I would vote. I would encourage a yes vote.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Traney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not to beat this in the ground, but this is the Port of Alaska that happens to be in Anchorage. When we take a look at all the goods that come into our state, they come right into here. And if that port's defective, you're going to have thousands of people that don't get the goods they count on every day when they go to the store. And this year in Juneau, it's not going to be just the Port of Alaska at Anchorage, it's going to be Port of Alaska at Nome. And the state legislature needs to come to terms with this and do the funding, the work they need to do to get this thing funded. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Traney. There's no one else in the queue. We need to put this on the board. Please vote. That item was approved. We are now down to agenda item number D2, I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, on behalf of Mr. Starr, recognizing that he cannot move it, I will move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. And is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Domboski. AM 659, 2016, amendment number 2 to professional service contract with CRW LLC to provide professional engineering services for capital improvement projects. Mr. Starr.
Oh, Madam Chair, I own a small development company, and one of the clients that I work for that provides I don't know if it's a significant amount of revenue, but so much so that I reported him as a significant client on my APOC report, owns a hangar that abuts this improvement. Consulted on a new hangar project that he's building there at the Merrill Field as it relates to the Quebec Taxiway. There's another one that I didn't pull that has more of an area-wide impact at Merrill Field, which relates to security cameras. That's the next item, which we've already approved on the consent agenda. But this one, however, does close out taxiway improvements and what I feel are improvements to this property. I consulted on that, so I also believe that for the initial part of the contract, I was exempted out. So this addendum or amendment, I would want to be exempted as well.
Ms. Dombowski?
Madam Chair, just one question. Mr. Starr, it appears you have a potential significant financial and/or private interest. Would you concur?
Yes, I would.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Dombowski. Mr. Starr, you're excused from voting on this. We'll see you in a moment.
Don't go too far.
Okay, there is no one else in the queue. Please vote. That item is approved. We are now at agenda item number 9D5, sole source contract with City of Whittier to provide professional police services to the Girdwood Valley Service Area from approximately October 15, 2016 to a date not later than December 31st, 2016. Mr. Evans.
Move to approve, Madam Chair.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Evans?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that the body was aware of what this is and what's going on. We're still, although it looks calm on the surface, there are a lot of people paddling furiously below the surface, including Mr. Falsey and others in the administration, to get police protection in Girdwood. So I just wanted to give either Mr. Abbott or Mr. Falsey a chance to, if there's anything they want to explain to the body before we vote on this.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Falsey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This assembly memorandum that we have laid on the table would provide the administration the authority to enter into a contract with the City of Whittier. As we understand it from communications from the City of Whittier's attorney, they would prefer and maybe have a need to break a contractual relationship into two pieces. One would be an interim contract, which they could enter into without having multiple city council meetings, and the second would be a longer-term contract to take us through the balance of the three-year term that the parties have been discussing. That requires two action items, an introduction and a subsequent action at a city council meeting, and so there's just timing-wise a need to break it into these two pieces. In any event, this would give the administration the ability to enter into that first piece of the contract, which we now understand could begin approximately April 15th, and which Whittier has offered to extend through the end of the year. Girdwood has requested that the interim contract be a little shorter. We are working through those negotiations now, but this action item would allow us to resolve it in either direction. By way of background and reminder, because the Anchorage Metropolitan Police Service Area ends at McHugh Creek, the Anchorage Police Department is not able to provide police services beyond McHugh Creek. The trooper precipitated the situation by announcing that the trooper post would be closing, and now we have reached that date.
Thank you, Mr. Falsey. Mr. Trainee?
Mr. Falls, you may have already covered it, but just so the public completely understands, we're only talking about the town of Girdwood. It doesn't include any of the other area down in there. Is that correct, Mr. Falls?
Through the chair, that is correct. We are talking about the Girdwood Valley Service Area more specifically. It is a polygon which encompasses virtually all of Girdwood, but not all of Crow Creek Road. They are the service area that has existed within the municipality since its inception, and which is the only part of the municipality other than the Anchorage Metropolitan Police Service Area which has voted to tax themselves to provide police services.
Thank you, Mr. Falsey. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Thank you, Mr. Falsey. There is no one else in the queue. I'd like to put this on the board. Please vote. That item is approved. Can somebody let Mr. Starr know that he can join us?
I told him not to go too much.
Thank you. We are now at agenda item 9E4. AIM 1. Can I read this first, Mr. Trainee? Thank you. AIM 132-2016, Anchorage Women's Commission Annual Report. Mr. Trainee?
Move to accept.
Thank you. Can we have a second? Thank you. Mr. Trainee?
Tiffany Hall, come and join us. Speak to us about this.
Thank you, Madam Chair and honorable assembly members. I'm Tiffany Hall. I'm the chair of the Anchorage Women's Commission. I have Commissioner Amy Chavot with me here. Thanks very much for letting us offer this report. I am a new chair, so sorry that it's a little bit late. I got kind of caught up doing the work of this year and forgot to give you a report of our work last year. But we did do a lot of work, and so our role for the Women's Commission is to advise the mayor and assembly on issues of importance to women. And so some of the things we did to do that, we attend community events to make sure that we understand what's going on and make sure that the community is aware of what Women's Commission is doing. We do some research activities. So last year that included a report on foster care that we turned into all of you. We do advocacy on important issues. One of the main things we did last year was talk about funding for the domestic violence and sexual assault intervention program. And we did strategic planning. And so moving forward, this year we did our strategic plan looking farther out than just 1 year. So over the next 3 years, we're going to be focusing on the gender wage gap. We'll be partnering with YWCA and hopefully with the municipality on that. We are looking at public safety. So right now that means we have a representative on Vision Zero and kind of trying to keep abreast of what else is going on there. And then also women's health, which is kind of one of our standard go-to items. So we lost 2 longtime commissioners at the end of last year, but we gained 4 incredible new commissioners. And I think we have a couple more spots to fill in October. We have some added roles on our commission. We have somebody doing social media now, and she's rocking it. And we also have some education and outreach, a position specifically for that. So we are really grateful to be here. We're excited for the coming year, and thanks very much.
Thank you for your service. There are no comments, no assembly comments. Thank you. Mr. Trainee, anything else, Mr. Trainee?
Nothing else, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I asked the body for unanimous consent to accept this AIM, and I see no objection till the AIM is accepted. And now, we can't go any further. We're at continued public hearings, which can't begin until 6. So I'm asking for a motion to recess until 6 p.m. In a second, please.
Move to recess till 6 p.m., ma'am.
Thank you. We're recessed until 6 p.m. I'd like to call the meeting of October 4th back to order. We are now at agenda item 13A, continued public hearings, AR 2016-90, a resolution granting a public hearing regarding the conditional protest of the renewal of liquor license 1078 for Fantasies on 5th, LLC DBA Fantasies on 5th, located at 1911 East 5th Avenue, Anchorage, 99501. Public hearing is now continued. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Mr. Trainee?
Move, Madam Chair, move to continue the public hearing to the 28th of February, 2017. The state is working on this license, and I think it should be resolved by then.
May I have a second? Any objection?
I have a question about that.
Mr. Starr?
When I drive by that building now, it's starting to become more decrepit every time I look at it. So, Mr. Trainee, do we risk turning that into a vacant building because we've held hostage everything it does? I understand what it does, but is there alternate uses to that facility that could keep it from going derelict?
I would tell you it's always been a derelict, but that would be an editorial comment.
Yeah.
Okay? This is because the state wage and hourly and wage people were complaining about their license. They're protesting it. So we're just going along with the state on this. They are taking the leadership on this.
So if they resolve that and the owner of the building said that they were going to sell or transfer their liquor license related to that to some other site and economies would go, would you bring this item back in front of us to
Absolutely.
Release it before February?
As soon as legal tells me I can.
Okay. Well, I don't want to be held to the February if something happens
No.
at the state level earlier.
If in fact that happens, I will do that, Mr.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Flynn?
Yeah, everyone's seated? Okay, good. I concur with Mr. Starr on this. I think this one has dragged on long enough, and while this resolution is not written correctly for what I think is the appropriate course of action, I think it's time just to say we no longer support this license. So maybe the two of us can talk and come up with something that's a little.
We can do that. What we're doing tonight was based on legal.
Yeah,
counsel,
I understand.
Our legal staff.
I'm clear on why we're doing what we're doing here, but I'm getting a little tired of this. This has dragged on too long.
I know. I agree with you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Falsey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly to provide a little additional clarity, this may be already well known to the Assembly, but the reason we are asking for this delay is that the Alcohol Control Board has itself moved to deny Fantasies on 5th its liquor license. Fantasies has appealed that decision, but there is no license at this point to protest. So we are kicking this down the road to see how the appeals process works out, and then to take act to preserve the ability of the Assembly to take action if that appeal goes in Fantasies' favor.
Thank you, Mr. Falsey. Mr. Trainee?
Mr. Falsey, can we make sure that that building's not become derelict and ran down? And I know we've got derelict building ordinance, but let's just have the police check on that enforcement. We want to make sure it's just not so deteriorated, gets beyond the pale of being able to bring it back if that's what they decide to do, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Weddleton?
To Mr. Falsey, so we passed a vacant building ordinance. Can they be the first to apply?
Through the chair, possibly. I will confess that I am not intimately familiar with the current status of Fantasies on 5th building. I have to defer to others on that.
Thank you, Mr. Falsey, Mr. Weddleton. The motion is to continue the public hearing to the meeting of February 28, 2017. I'd like to put this on the board. Please vote. This item is continued to the meeting of February 28, 2017. The next item on the agenda, it's new public hearing, AO 2016-60, an ordinance to reauthorize certain boards and commissions by amending the sunset provisions in Anchorage Municipal Code sections 4.40125, 4.40150, 4.50020, 4.60105, 4.60150, 4.60210, and 4.80010. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Starr?
I need to entertain a motion to amend on line 34 and that relates to the Chugiak Eagle River Advisory Board. The dates of extension on all these other ones takes it out to October of 19, and I had thought we made a correction inside the Title 21 empowerment that we also empowered it 2-year updates. So if I'd like to make the motion and then be ruled out of line later, I'd like to move to make a motion.
You can make the motion right now, Mr.
Change that
Starr.
date on line 34, that the board shall terminate on October 14th of 2019.
Second.
At page 2, I'm sorry, yep.
On page 2.
Yeah.
It's page 2, line 34.
Page 2, line 34. Thank you. So that's, instead of 18, it should be 19, correct?
Right.
There are no comments. Let's vote on the motion, please. That amendment is approved. We are now at the main motion, AO 2016-60. There's no one in the queue. Mr. Flynn.
Oh, just, Madam Chair, I was impressed by how quickly and effectively and eruditely you read the title of this particularly complicated ordinance. So well done.
Thank you. Thank you. Please. Mr. Flynn, you threw me for a loop. I forgot what I was doing.
See? I wanted to get you out of the rhythm. Now we're voting, right?
Wow. Please vote on the main motion.
Mr. Flynn, you jocked her into neutral.
That item is approved. Oh, Mr. Steele, you didn't vote. It was approved without your vote, but would you please vote? Thank you. Now it's unanimous. Thank you. We are now at agenda item 14B, AR 2016-258, a resolution approving a marijuana license and special land use permit for a marijuana retail store establishment with license number M137, DBA as Arctic Herbery. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none. Public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second. And there is no one in the queue, and so we're going to vote on the motion. Please vote. That item was approved. We are now down to, there's no special order, unfinished biz agenda, audience participation. Okay.
Is there assembly comments?
We're going to get to that in a moment. Yeah, the clerk just advised me that there are some Boy Scouts here, and so we'd like to invite you to come up and introduce yourselves. Point of personal privilege. No, Lisa just told me.
Hello, we are Troop 222. So, yeah, I'm Carter Burpee. I'm our platoon patrol leader. So, yeah.
And I'm Quinn Burpee. I'm Carter's brother.
I'm Jeremy Smith.
I'm Jacob Listina, our newest member.
I'm Isaac Wan, and I'm the tallest.
I'm Connor Lemon.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Hi, wait a second.
Wait a
Mr.
minute.
Trainee.
Which organization is the one that charters you?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Which organization do you work with? What church or something?
Yeah, we're with the LDS Church.
Which ward?
Mount Baldy.
Okay, out in Eagle River.
Yep.
It's one of yours, Amy.
I recognize the name Burpee.
We
I was just going to
pointed
ask.
out that. We were like, hey, she's ours.
And Ms. Dombrowski.
Debbie
Thank
used
you.
to say they named it after me.
Yeah, I recognize the name Burpee. I was like, there's Eagle River, I know it. So, gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight. Welcome. We appreciate your dedication to our community. And now I have a quiz for you. So, Chugiak Eagle River has 2 assembly members. Can you point to the 2 assembly members? Okay, we'll raise our hands. Thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for your continued service to our community.
And when you want to work on your merit badge, citizenship in the city, come and talk to us. More than happy to come out and talk to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Dombrowski. Thank you, Mr. Trainee. We are now at audience participation. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone want to come and talk to us about anything that was not on the agenda this evening? Welcome, sir.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Virgil Higgins. Been a resident of Anchorage since 1996. And I just wanted to let y'all know how appalled I was last week at one of your members who decided not to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. To me, that is a kick in the teeth of any man, woman that has ever served in the United States military or as a first responder. And I would appreciate it if every member of this assembly would stand, at least stand, during the Pledge of Allegiance or during the national anthem. And that's all I've got to say.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to be heard? Good evening, sir.
Yeah, my name's Don Smith, and I'm a proud Marine, and I'd appreciate that too. You know, this assembly, this room belongs to the people. If we've got political statements to make, I don't believe this is a place for it. I think we've got more important things to deal with, and I don't think we need to be separating. We're Alaskans, that's what we are. We are Americans, but we are Alaskans. And I was raised that way. If one hurts, we all hurt. If one's broke, we give them money. We don't separate like out in the lower 48. We are Alaskans, and that's what we need to start instilling in our children like my parents and elders did us. Alaska's a great place, but it's getting divided. And I don't care what political group you're with or what. You are a Alaskan if you're sitting up there. And we need to start, you know, promoting this to our children, that we're one. We're Alaskans. You know, we have to stick together because the life that we chose to live up here is because we're different. We are different than those people out in the States. You know, I remember, I want to share something real quick with my father shared with me. When I was in the 4th grade, living out at Abbott Loop, and Lake Otis was a dirt road out there then. And we didn't have many African Americans in Anchorage at that time. And a family moved out there in the Spruce Trailer Court. And I could say I was in the 4th grade, and this young man showed up in class, and there was a few of the kids started giving him a hard time and picking on him and bullying him. And it really bothered me. So when I got home, I talked to my father about it. And he said, "This is what you do, son. Tomorrow, you go ask that teacher for him to sit by you and explain that if he's going to live here in Alaska, that he's an Alaskan." And that's all of us. And it takes all of us to survive. Back then it did. You killed a moose, you shared the moose. Caribou. Somebody was broke, you gave them money to pay their electric bill. This separation stuff's got to stop up here. You know, I'm about at the end of my line here. You know, I've fought cancer twice here and at it again. But I've got grandchildren all the way down to a year and a half old. And I'd like them to continue here. But this, you know, talking about different groups of people and different places they're from and nationalities, that's not Alaska. We're Alaskans. That's what we are.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Anyway, thank you very much.
Welcome. Anyone else wish to be heard? Anyone else wish to speak to us this evening? Mr. Weddleton.
Are we going to go around and make...
We're going to do assembly comments because there's no one else coming to the podium. So, Mr. Weddleton, we'll start with you.
I just wanted to make note that with breathtaking speed, we blew by the notable first approval of a retail marijuana establishment in Anchorage. We haven't made it easy on everyone, but I wish them luck and expect and hope they do a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Starr, you were in the queue, or you're out now? Would you?
If you're going down the road, I'm fine.
Okay, I'll go down the road. Mr. Dunbar.
I have no comment this night.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Starr.
Well, through the chair, Mr. Mayor, you and I spoke briefly over the weekend, and I want to get more of a public answer to your pledge to give us some municipal resources on crime analysis and crime awareness by Community Council Division. And we talked just high-level generalities, but I thought you understood the concept. I announced it along with Mr. Trainey and Ms. Dembowski. Mr. Trainey and I are going to partner up on the initiative, which basically feeds monthly data to the community councils, particularly in my district. I would like to start out with 5 or 6 of the community councils with a dedicated report of crime awareness. The second module of that is to have a resource provided from the APD so that the community council presidents have a knowledgeable liaison, perhaps an officer or supervisor that they can consult on the phone with crime trends. So we've talked, Mr. Trainey and I have talked about the need to process and generate a resolution to formalize our request to the administration, but I'm thinking about it. I would rather just have your sort of acknowledgement agreement that we can use municipal resources and the talents and aspects of the crime analysis folks at APD to help me.
Madam Chair?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, and it was a good conversation that we had. We want to make sure that as much crime information gets out so people understand where we are in terms of making progress in public safety or if there's particular challenges. Some of this has to do with increased transparency, making more data available, and we're working towards that as well. As for dedicating more officers towards the community councils, some of this we're constrained at this point because of limited staffing, and when we get to full strength, I'm sure the community councils will see more from their police department.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I appreciated that answer, and you can certainly say there's more information available on the websites and all of that. I get all of that, but in this particular solution, I think we're going to have to feed it to them as opposed to putting the burden on the councils to do it. The need for additional resources, I don't feel like I need the officers to show up at the community councils. I don't think that's what I'm hearing from the council presidents, but a resource beyond me that understands law enforcement, that can identify trends, and I think you're going to take it right down to the grassroots. So where I would envision that as a conversation, an avenue, maybe the chief of police is who you designate for that kind of conversation to occur. But the council presidents, I was one, there's plenty others here on the body that have served in community councils. It's a unique grassroots opportunity to hear directly from those that are affected by that in their area, and it empowers them to sort of say, I'll make a call and maybe move that solution differently than the full burden on APD. I think that the councils and the council members, with that opportunity to dialogue in some capacity, it doesn't mean I'm looking for a dedicated officer to show up at the meetings, but a clearinghouse that they can say, hey, this is happening. What can you do for us? Can you help us? And I think that's the business model that I see working in my district. If it's citywide, awesome. But I think ideally we made that commitment at the meeting, and I'd like to pursue it with the authority to contact some of your folks or whoever you tell me to work with.
Well, I think there's a certain harmony between community councils and community policing. I think we can figure out a way to make it work.
Yeah, I think that observation's great. Again, you run the executive branch, and I don't feel necessarily that we need a authoritarian resolution to tell you that. So if you can help us, I'd appreciate that. Mr. Trainey and I'll approach you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Mayor.
you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Peterson. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Steele.
Yeah, I do want to congratulate Alaska Herbery in terms of how well they adjusted to all the little ins and outs and the problems of being first. You've got a good standing as number one here now, and so go forth and do good.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Trainey.
Just, Mr. Starr, I talked to the chief earlier, and they can break raids down by community council, by assembly district, and further broken down by community council. So the chief and I intend to talk about how we can then get that data out monthly to the community council. We're working on that. We'll have the administration support on this, Mr. Starr.
Thank you, Mr. Trainey. I just want to take a moment to once again thank the Community and Economic Development Committee for doing such a great job. I mean, it's pretty amazing. We had an item on the agenda that was before your committee, and the Assembly also had a work session, and we got through it without any comment. So thank you for doing such a great job, committee. Mr. Flynn. Mr. Evans. Mr. Croft?
I had predicted that we'd stay till more like 8.
But that's not happening.
So I have extended remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Croft. Mr. Mbosky?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to, I was remiss in mentioning the number one entity that helped me put together the town hall meeting, and that was the Chugiak Eagle River Senior Center. So I usually thank them first, and I don't know why I didn't, but I just want to point out that, some of the assembly members who have been out there recognize this really is an incredible community center. It's not just a senior center, it's a community center. So if you haven't had the opportunity to tour the senior center, I really suggest that you do, because some of the things that they're doing out there in their programs, I think could translate to Anchorage programs too. So again, I just wanted to thank the Chugiak Eagle River Senior Center.
Thank you, Mr. Mbosky. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please, in a second?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.